Let's play a game, faithful readers, called Name That Movie. An ex-pilot, who tragically led his team to their deaths in the war, develops a fear of flying. When his significant other leaves him, he boards the plane she's on, hoping for another chance. Then fate intervenes, and both pilots, and a number of passengers, develop food poisoning. With no one else to turn to, it falls on the ex-pilot to overcome his trauma and land the plane. If you said 1980's Airplane, you're right. If you said 1957's 0 Hour, you're also right. In the words of Wayne Campbell, Mike Myers, "Excuse me? A baking powder? How can both be true?" Well, believe it or not, Airplane isn't just one of the greatest comedies of all time, it's also a remake of 0 Hour, and even though the latter is a taut drama and the former a farce for the ages, Airplane stays remarkably faithful to the original. Extremely, precisely, remarkably faithful. And the fact that a note-for-note remake of a drama could be so expertly reimagined as a comedy is a testament to the vision of its famed trio of directors, David Zucker, Jerry Zucker, and Jim Abrahams, whose death on November 26 is a tragic loss for the world of Hollywood comedy. How 0 Hour came to be the runway on which Airplane took flight is a truly fascinating story. As recounted by Jim Abrahams, who directed the film alongside frequent collaborators David Zucker and Jerry Zucker, aka ZAZ, one of the ways the trio would gather material for their small theater, the Kentucky Fried Theater, would be to record stuff on TV, whatever was on, and then mine the recordings for material to make fun of. One morning, while reviewing footage, they came across 0 Hour. The film, written by Arthur Haley, who also wrote Airport, the novel which was adapted for film in 1970, caught their attention, and they sat riveted through the whole feature. They had created an early script prior to their first feature film, Kentucky Fried Movie, but they wholeheartedly admit it wasn't good. David Zucker says, "I think it featured Beaver and Wally flying down the plane." Inspired by 0 Hour, the trio set out to make a new draft for Airplane. Their first, Up, draft had fake commercials throughout, much like their first film, but as they progressed they realized that Haley's story was strong, and as such the fake ads, funny as they may have been, would have disrupted the flow of the film. So, they, wisely, stuck to the plot of 0 Hour. Abrahams admits, "We weren't screenwriters at all, we were joke writers." So close, in fact, that they feared facing a copyright battle in court. Looking to avoid even the possibility, ZAZ began looking to negotiate the rights for a remake of the film, ensuring Airplane would be safe under the parody law. They were successful in obtaining the rights, co-owned by Warner Brothers and Paramount, for approximately $2,500. Now, granted full creative freedom, they could use 0 Hour as they saw fit. The problem was, none of the studios were biting. Kentucky Fried Movie gave them a degree of credibility, but not to the degree where a studio would take a chance on the film with ZAZ co-directing. Finally, as per the previously cited AV Club, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg at Paramount stepped in, and despite fears that the studio would step in by trying to rewrite it, thus ruining what ZAZ was going for, they proved to be an invaluable asset for the trio. People with the studio helped by teaching the trio about making plot points into jokes and vice versa, where to make cuts, and kept their focus on the plot, removing any excess material that wasn't necessary. 0 Hour was still their blueprint, however, and ZAZ stuck to their guns on using the film as the basis of Airplane. To a degree. As David Zucker recalls, they were hell-bent on making the film in black and white, with the story playing out on a prop plane, as it does in the original film. Eisner stated that it was to be on a jet plane and in color. At odds, ZAZ pleaded their case only for Eisner to say, "You may go on to make this movie in black and white and on a prop plane, and it may be very successful. But it won't be at this studio." They ceded, and confessed it was the right call. For ZAZ, the key to Airplane was for the actors to do everything straight, and despite Paramount offering suggestions like Bill Murray and Chevy Chase, they pushed for straight actors, ones willing to have a laugh at the expense of their own images. In other words, they wanted actors who would play their roles earnestly, as if the movie was just as dramatic as 0 Hour, without copping to the fact they're appearing in a comedy. Actors like Chase and Murray, at least at that point in time, were great at comedies because they could play their roles knowing they are in a comedy. Murray, for example, could play the mentally unstable greenskeeper in Caddyshack the way he did because it was a comedy aiming to be a comedy, but to pull off a comic performance by playing it dramatic, thereby making it comic, takes a skill set that they didn't have. Charlton Heston was one actor they approached, as was George Kennedy, who did appear in the airport films, but they declined. However, Robert Stack, who was high on their wish list, did come on board, as did Lloyd Bridges and Peter Graves. Amusingly, the pilot in 0 Hour was played by Elroy Crazylegs Hirsch, who was a professional football player at the time, so casting Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the co-pilot is a fun nod to the original film. Another nod to the film, albeit inadvertently, lies with the one actor whose career benefited most from the film, Leslie Nielsen. Nielsen is Canadian by birth, born in Regina, Saskatchewan, while the events that happen in 0 Hour take place in the skies above Canada. ZAZ didn't just use 0 Hour as a baseline for Airplane, but pulled nearly everything from the film verbatim: camera shots, dialogue, character names, and plot devices. Watching 0 Hour after seeing Airplane is an experience one really does need to do at least once. You can see a side-by-side comparison here. Everything that transpires in the original takes place in the remake, from Joey, Ray Farrell, meeting the pilots in the cockpit, the pilots and passengers becoming deathly sick because of the fish dinner, and the panicked passenger who is slapped in an effort to calm her down. The one scene that isn't in the original, where the nun, Maureen McGovern, is singing to the sick girl, Jill Whalen, is a parody of a similar scene in Airport 1975, so same genre, just a different film. Otherwise, it is, for all intents and purposes, 0 Hour in color, but that still doesn't explain how a melodramatic disaster film turns into a comedy, one that is practically the same film. How ZAZ cleverly achieves this is by extending the scenes with an unexpected, silly capper. The scene where the camera pans across the instrument panel is identical, only in Airplane. It's extended by a ridiculous amount. The woman being slapped to calm her down in the original has the same thing happen, only there is a lineup of people looking to do the same. "I picked the wrong week to quit smoking," an exact line from the original, is said, but followed up by "I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue" and "I picked the wrong week to quit amphetamines," respectively. Joey visiting the cockpit plays out the same in both, only for Graves' captain over to extend the moment by asking highly inappropriate questions. Air traffic controller Johnny is a background character in 0 Hour, but Steven Stucker extends his moments with origami and cries of, "The Tower! The Tower! Rapunzel, Rapunzel!" They then add visual gags in the background, like the jars of mayonnaise behind Dr. Brody, Jason Wingreen, at the Mayo Clinic. Fun fact, yours truly didn't catch that until years later. One of a few jokes that flew over people's heads the first time around, and non sequiturs like, "I am serious," and "Don't call me Shirley," or this personal favorite exchange. Airplane took off, going on to become a massive hit for Paramount, bringing in nearly $84 million against a budget of $3.5 million. In doing so, it separated itself from the pack by becoming one of the most prominent, genre-changing film comedies of all time. Meanwhile, 0 Hour is largely forgotten, the answer to a pub trivia night at best. But there is no Airplane, no Police Squad, no The Naked Gun trilogy without it, and for that reason alone, the film deserves to be recognized and seen on its own merits. Here's a helpful hint: if you're watching the film while dining, avoid the fish and have the lasagna instead. Airplane is available to watch on Prime Video in the US.